There's no two ways about that, but it was just dealing with his size was so tough. And so I kept kind of getting him down and getting small scores. And I'll never forget one of the times we went down and I didn't score. He just kind of flopped on top of me. And I'll never forget getting up and kind of looking over at him was just that look, not of defeat, but of not demoralised, deflated look on my face. And my coach, John, again, may God rest his soul, was on the referee panel. Yeah. And I looked up at him, he sat up straight like this, and he pointed at me, pointed at the guy, and then he pointed down. He just went, you put him down. And I'll never forget that, because I stood up and I just kept going at it, and then I managed to get, the Wazari, which is the second highest score, which then guaranteed me winning the fight, because the guy wasn't throwing me. So yeah, he was definitely, somewhat of a role model, you could say, and an inspiration in many ways. Like, he definitely taught me about toughness, and judo is, in general, as a sport or a martial art, more importantly, is very good for that, because you're basically slamming bodies and having your body slammed off of the ground. So it helped to teach that, So that would definitely be one. Yeah. And it is kind of hard, like for one-to-one personal kind of role models, mentors, not a great deal, to be honest. So you're correct. I have drawn a lot of it from education, reading, philosophy. It was Far Eastern philosophy was my big thing. Obviously, being a martial artist and being inspired that way. Bruce Lee obviously was a huge thing. Initially it was Brandon Lee, but I found out about Bruce Lee through Brandon Lee. Strangely, it was the kind of backwards from what. It's always
the other way around, isn't it? Yeah.
And I was lucky to be coached by a second generation Bruce Lee student.
Wow.
Via first generation student. It's funny it comes up now, because I was saying it to one of my young students yesterday, brought up Bruce Lee, and he knew that I'd trained in Bruce Lee's art. That's this whole other discussion. Talking about Bruce Lee's art, and that's the reason I left there, to be honest, because they all bicker and mine's better, and I was like, bye, goodbye. So I was lucky enough to be trained by him. So there's basically the lineage runs Bruce Lee, Ted Wong, Tommy, and then me, which is not something I really ever talk about or think about, is my lineage in martial arts, because that's something that's so popular, so important to other people, but I just don't really care about. I don't really about the lineage. I care about the skill set, the ability, and especially someone's capabilities as a teacher. So I'm very, very critical of people when they teach these things. So mostly self-taught is definitely and especially recently,
Yeah. Wow. But it looks like that kind of upbringing and growing up, in a way, whether right or wrongly, has actually enabled you to break through into your own definition of success, because in your mind you've created a vision of what success and living in accordance with you as a person and your values is. And you mentioned a key word as well, in terms of discipline as well, because that's quite a key area in martial arts, isn't it? Discipline, because in as far as there is like the physical side of it, but the big chunk of that is the mind, isn't it? Yeah. You talk us about that.
People so often think about the word discipline as a negative as well. They think about it as being told what to do, because that's certainly, we're raised with the word discipline meaning do what you're told, basically. When actually what discipline is your own ability to consistently carry things forward and do what needs to be done to get the outcome you require, which is a big thing I teach to my young mentoring students. Is that, school, just, whether you love it or hate it, look at it as training. You're learning to deal with stuff that comes at you that you don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson to carry forward in life. If you can do that, I taught it to my own kids, and I teach it to my young mentoring students as well. And I was like, if you look at it that way, that school isn't preparing you necessarily in an educational form, in a formal education way for life. It's more of an informal education. It's the education that's hidden below the education, if you get my meaning. And it's just something I never saw, or it's a concept I couldn't even grasp when I was at school. But I can see it as that now, so I kind of teach that concept to younger ones going through school, and it tends to work very well for them. So it does. And I think that's very, very important to understand, what discipline actually is at a young age. It's not that person over there telling you to sit up straight. And, that's the kind of thing people have as relates to martial arts. It's discipline. Listen to your teacher. Which of course there is that element, of course. No, it's the discipline about coming back every week, practicing to get to the point where they call it Wu Wei and excuse me, Wu Wei in China, as in no mind. So that you practice it, so that especially the physical, it can be done with the mental as well, but especially with the physical, it's to quote the great Bruce Lee, I don't hit, it hits itself, which means I've trained it to that point where I don't have to think about this movement. That movement just happens. And that frees up all the important functional areas of the brain to break down, to monitor more important things in your environment. The micro signals that a person may give you, for instance, in a self-defense situation, all that sort of stuff, or in the ring, being able to read your opponent instead of worrying about what move you're going to do yourself. The body and the brain are connected, and they just know how to do it. So that's the kind of discipline to reach that kind of that state. Let's say they would call no mind. It takes discipline to get there. It takes thousands and thousands of repetitions and movement and mind, and the same thing, applies across the board. This is why martial arts is a great principle, a great base. It's why the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi was so popular in the business world, because they're transferable skills. They're very transferable skills.
Absolutely. No, that's great share, Douglas. Now, would you say the direction that your life has taken to the martial arts area was, would you say that was sort of intentional as your journey progressed, or you just stumbled onto it by accident through a number of things that were happening in your life?
To where I am now?
Like the martial arts space.
Well, the martial arts space was just something that I was taken to by my mother, and I connected with. I learned 12 moves in the first session. My coach wanted me to go on to fight in the Commonwealth and then Olympic Games. But I left it for music, so that's kind of where that ties in. I stopped doing it for music for quite a while. Then I got back into it. I got into Muay Thai, I got into Jeet Kune Do and various other things. So I came back to that. But the martial arts has definitely led me to where I am now. There are two ways about it. It's quite interesting. The two best, because I've got a big thing full of all different qualifications, from anti-terrorism to sports nutrition. And I pulled out my old high school or secondary school qualification sheet, which was very small. But the two things I got great marks in back then when I was like 14. And this says something about the education system as well, because they try and guide you to your career. My two best grades were in PE, physical education, and biology.
Oh, wow.
which are the two skills that I apply now.
Yeah, wow, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because
It's very
it does
interesting.
show you there, whether consciously or unconsciously, but there was something that you were good at originally that has led you to where you are now. But I mean, in that phase, I mean, obviously now you are into martial arts, but if events had turned out different and you are not introduced here, could you see yourself doing something else different to martial arts, for example?